Why do you do that?
They have complete control of the Chromebooks. They literally have like apps set.
Okay, so I know that this picture is a little bit small, and I tried to rotate it, but it made me anxious. So I put it back the way it's supposed to be looked at. So what do you see happening in this picture?
It's a snake.
I can't remember.
It looks like the movie Holes.
It looks kind of like the movie Holes.
That's what I was about to say.
The deforestation.
There's a
Reforestation.
sand biome, and then like
Reforestation that turns into a taiga.
yeah,
It's like mine.
It's either deforestation or reforestation.
Populations are being distributed.
It's hay bales.
I'll tell you, this is an African biome.
Yes.
It is not deforested.
no.
It has to do with the idea that Kendra noticed it looks like holes.
Is it meerkats?
With Stanley Yelness.
No, this is not your
Oh yeah, because it's a.
similar idea.
Ostrich.
Not
Oh, my
ostrich.
blue book.
Woodpecker.
What do you notice kind of spatter across the whole picture, the whole biome?
Trees.
Well, there's trees, but
Vegetation.
Divots.
they look like holes.
Are they ants?
They're actually the opposite of holes.
They're hills.
They're little hills, they're mounds.
Are they ants?
Wait, are they?
They're not ants. They're a close relative
Are
of
they
ants.
termites?
They are termites.
Oh, this is a log.
I saw those on
What?
Wild Crafts.
Is this
Oh,
like,
like,
is this like
I
close
get
up of
most
a
of
The-
the
log?
information from
What?
It's like a close up of a log and like.
No. This is an aerial view from a helicopter.
What do you do not stand in that
I
pile?
don't know.
So those are termite mounds. What do you notice about the mounds?
There's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them.
They're big.
They're big.
Oh, yeah.
They
Yeah,
make shadows.
They're distributed.
They're distributed. They're spread out. Do you see any of them that are like right smack dab next to each other?
No.
No, they've got their own space.
Doesn't look like they're in the green area.
They're not in the, well, it's harder to tell, but they're probably not because they're termites. So we're going to focus in on today on why certain populations clump together, why certain populations spread out, and why some are like this, where they're almost the exact same distance away from each other. But before we do that, we're going to start with penguins because sometimes you just need to see a penguin video.
Oh, it's super soft.
Yeah, that's a good one. I like that movie a lot.
You want Surf's Up?
Number 2.
Surf's Up. There's a second Surf's Up?
Yes.
Yeah.
You.
Wait, it was
Yeah,
The first one's good.
there was a cat.
It's got a big Zeus.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So, what was happening in our little penguin video?
They're walking.
They're walking.
They're walking
together.
together. They're almost like a little school. Like you got a little teacher, like an elementary school, and they say find the line.
Are you proud of yourself now?
No. They're like find the line. You guys remember when they'd say find the line?
No.
I forgot about that until I started subbing. I subbed at elementary school a couple of years ago, and then everyone's like find your line, and all the kids would like find their spot in their line. They have a leader. This is what this video, these penguins kind of remind me of that. Like there's the teacher figure, then there's all little small elementary kids like following behind, and then there's always that one little kid that's at the way back that's kind of lost.
That was quite cool.
That was not.
This was probably Kendra, the one in the back looking around.
No, I was in front.
It's open up.
In elementary school, and like one kid, there's like one really tiny
And then they shook it out.
How would you describe this group of like? What if you were to give this name of penguins something? What would you call it?
A
Steve.
gaggle.
A gaggle?
a gaggle of geese.
A gaggle of geese?
Flock.
A flock?
A murder.
A murder? We're all talking about bird things, so at least we're on the right track. A murder of crows, a gaggle of geese, a flock of
My grandpa getting up
anything.
Pride of penguins.
A pride of penguins. I don't.
Oh.
That sounds right.
Well, we say pride of lions, so it's not like they need to start with the same letter.
So.
I think it's honestly a troop of penguins.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
Alliteration.
I have no. We can look it up, but I don't know right now.
More important than accurate.
A school of penguins.
That's like
So today's all about population distribution. So like how animals and organisms group together, how they spread out. It's kind of like the process of how they don't go through. They prevent incest, inbreeding.
the giraffe guy, the cute giraffe guy.
Oh, the guy that was talking about the giraffe killing the lion.
Yeah.
Or the lion killing the giraffe because
I
it's
don't know
tripped.
what you see in these men.
Yo, you wrote a good
Okay.
Oh yeah, there was ponytail guy at Goodwill.
With his girlfriend and all, he's like,
Yeah, there was like.
Okay, so first slide announcements quick. Make sure you turn in your Isle Royale Wolves Google Doc from last week. A lot of you are probably done with it. You just have to actually turn it in. And that'll go in the grade book. On Friday, we're going to finish up Population Ecology. It's a really short unit. We started it last week when I wasn't here. It'll be this week. And then on Friday, we're going to have a quiz on it. It will be an open note quiz for Friday. And that's also the midterms. So it's also a reason why we're going to do a quiz on Fridays, because midterms, the first midterm ends, the first quarter of the first semester ends on Friday. So open note quiz. If you did not look over the notes from last week, the video I posted or the slideshow, make sure you look over that because that will be on this quiz. So make sure you take notes on it if you have not and you look through it. Ben?
Should I turn the lab?
Yes. I can tell you right now, the lab we did on Thursday with the was it Thursday? Yeah, Thursday, because we didn't have Friday class.
is lab.
Thursday with the beans, there will be one question about that on the quiz.
Beans.
Beans. I won't make you use beans though.
That was the most horrible
I didn't
thing.
like that.
I like it.
My fingers.
It's funny
hurt
for me.
from, like, picking up the beans. I came to choir in a bad mood.
Okay, so we're looking at this image here.
It's a school of fish.
School of fish. What's happening with this school of fish?
They're hurting.
Well, it looks like doesn't it make it harder for the predator to eat them?
They're certainly
Yeah.
limiting.
So yeah, this is all about the predator. It doesn't necessarily make it harder for them to eat. What is the benefit of all these fish grouping up like this?
Less likely they get eaten.
Well, it's just like the insect.
Maybe it's confusing the predator.
What did I just see? They look like a big thing instead of.
They look like a big fish. They look like a big blob. It's a lot more intimidating for the fish to dive on in. Anyone ever watch Gabriel Iglesias?
Yes.
He does a bit about him going through the different levels of fatness.
Yep, I remember that.
And he's in the elevator, and he's a hefty guy. And he saw another larger man coming towards him, and he's like clicking the close button in the elevator, like, no! This is what I kind of picture with that. You have a bunch of small fish that can easily be preyed upon when they're by themselves, clumped together, and all the larger predatory fish are like, not doing it. It's not gonna happen, bro. So you can easily see how this could be a benefit for these organisms, where it's a defense mechanism. How are they all swimming? Well, they're all swimming in a group.
They're like this.
Together.
They're all swimming together. Like they're all moving kind of in unison. They're all moving in the same direction. It helps with the illusion that they're a larger organism.
Yeah, I think in like Nemo, they made them look like a school of fish, and then they made like them look like a fish. Like,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Just like that. Smaller fish, specifically the lowest fish on the food chain, you tend to have a tendency to do this because you have a greater fitness, a greater ability to survive doing this than if you're off by yourself. Like if you see a couple of the smaller fish or sardines that kind of scoot out, they probably won't make it.
They're gonna die.
They're gonna die.
Why Natural selection coming at you.
Oh god. Pantagonian seabird.
Patagonia. Did you say Patagonia?
This one's pretty cool. I like this. You see this a lot in seabirds. What are we noticing about these seabirds?
They're sitting.
They're sitting on what?
Little nests.
They're sitting on their nest. What do you notice about their nests?
They're elevated.
They're elevated. They're mounds. They're elevated off the ground.
And they do it near each other.
Near each other, but are any of them touching?
No.
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 Oh god. No.
You see this a lot in seabirds. Seabirds can be very territorial. They like their space. And when things invade their space, they're not very happy about it. They tend to start to get very defensive when other seabirds or other animals encroach on their space. So for this reason, when they're building their nests, they're almost exactly the same distance apart. Usually you see this type of distribution in the social animals that do tend to still be a little bit aggressive towards each other. They're not completely secluded. They like to group up, but they still like to have their own space. This way things don't attack their nest. They don't destroy the nest, kill off their babies.
Eat the baby.
Kill them.
What about this one?
Dandelions.
It's very low resolution.
Bang nailed it, the dandelions. What about it's lower resolution than the other ones?
They're clumped together.
They're clumped together. Is there really like any pattern going on here?
Random distribution.
The pattern is
Yeah.
where they landed.
This is pretty random. They just kind of grow where the seeds fall. They don't really impede the growth of other dandelions. They're not territorial. Dandelions don't attack other dandelions. Everyone knows dandelions are an invasive species, right?
They think they were pretty, and then they brought them over from Europe or something.
It's usually what happened. Dandelions are an invasive species. They are not native to the U.S. That's why there's so many. Usually you see large fields just like this of dandelions. That's not how it's meant to be. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's just what we've got going on right now. But yeah, there's no pattern here. There's no set distribution. They're not perfectly spaced between each other. It's just kind of random. Depends on where they fall. We're getting there. Like I said, there's not a ton of notes this one. We're looking at a lot of videos and pictures today.
Organisms may live in flocks, herds, pairs, or as solitary individuals, or they may cluster around resources such as water holes. Distribution may vary with time, changing with the breeding season, for example. Ecologists recognize three major types of spatial distribution: aggregated, uniform, and random. The most common pattern of distribution is aggregated, in which members of the population tend to live in groups. Many species form family or social groupings, such as elephant herds, baboon troops, flocks of birds, or schools of fish. What are the advantages of aggregation? Flocks provide many eyes on the lookout for localized food, such as a tree full of fruit. Schooling fish avoid predation by confusing the predator with countless flashing bodies darting in all directions. Some species, such as elephant seals, form temporary aggregations for mating. Other plant or animal populations cluster not for social reasons, but because resources such as nutrients, shelter, or water are localized. For example, cottonwood trees grow along streams and rivers in grasslands, while many species of animals aggregate around water holes in the dry savanna of Africa. Uniformly distributed organisms maintain a relatively constant distance between individuals. Spacing is often the result of defending scarce resources, such as breeding sites, nutrients, or water. This distribution occurs most frequently among animals that defend territories. Shorebirds and others, like these African penguins, are also found often in evenly spaced nests, just out of reach of one another. Other territorial species, such as many birds of prey, mate for life, and mating pairs continuously occupy well-defined, very large, and relatively uniformly spaced territories. Desert plants growing in poor soil with limited water, such as the creosote bush, have chemical spacing mechanisms that assure adequate resources for each individual. Likewise, many animals, such as large cats, mark their territories by chemical means to avoid violent face-to-face confrontations.
That's cute. So cute.
Random distribution is the least common. Here, individuals do not form social groups. The resources they need are, more or less, equally available throughout the area they inhabit, and resources are not scarce enough to require territorial spacing. Trees and other plants in rainforests come close to being randomly distributed. There are probably no vertebrate species that maintain random distribution throughout the year because they must breed, a behavior that makes social interaction inevitable. But other than breeding and coming together to feed at prime feeding locations during salmon runs, bears spend most of their time largely in randomly spaced isolation from one another, except, of course, sows and their cubs.
Bear on my property.
Have you seen that image of
Yeah.
a shaved
What
bear?
do you do, Dare?
A shaved bear.
Oh my god.
To be fair, most animals don't like lose their fur. Like they look pretty weird in general. Like cats, when people shave cats or have a bald cat, they look pretty weird.
Any animal
Okay.
that is completely shaved is like.
I'm slightly allergic to cats, so I keep trying to tell Shelby that we need to get a Sphinx cat.
Yes,
But she won't let me do it.
they're so cute.
I wouldn't necessarily say cute is why I want one. And I like cats and
This is just weird. Is that why you want it?
Are you sure?
no, I'm slightly allergic to like the fur on cats. So like it's irritating enough to me where I don't want to necessarily have to take like Benadryl all the time to deal with it
And being tired
all the time. So I don't want to do that. So like having a Sphinx cat would solve the problem because there's no fur on them.
You have great naps.
Naps are nice.
So, did anyone catch who the three types of distribution are?
Aggregated.
Aggregated, uniform, random. Aggregated, uniform, and random. What are the primary causes of these different types of distribution? Like what leads animals to be clumped together? Or resources are a big one.
Safety.
Safety, resources, safety, mates. Those are pretty much the big three. Food, water, shelter, breeding, and then security.
You could have any of these guys. I'm paying attention, I swear.
So- When did it say we would see a random distribution?
Most of the time. When did it say when we see a random distribution?
So plants, coral, but what has to occur for something to actually go through a random distribution? This is what the video was talking about. Plentiful resources. So like it was saying, random is not very common because there aren't a ton of ecosystems out there that you're able to have an unlimited supply of water, an unlimited supply of food, where resources are plentiful enough where you don't have to group together or socialize near a watering hole. There are very few ecosystems where that happens. There are organisms like they were talking about with the bears that do have a random distribution most of the year, but because of the drive to breed during the breeding season or during the salmon runs, they have to clump together for those reasons and be social at those points. So here's the first one, aggregated, which basically means clumped. These are animals, plants, organisms that tend to herd together, they group together, they stay in close proximity. They tend to have very strong social relations here.
This is great.
Wildebeest are the largest
I can see that.
the largest grouping of any animal on the planet. They get in groups of millions. I think there's a herd in Africa that is like 9 million strong. Something like that. But they're the largest herd of any living organism on the planet. And they go on one of the largest migratory routes. They're always moving. Usually when you see populations this big, you're mainly focusing on the fact that there's safety in numbers. I don't know a bunch of lions that are going to dive headfirst into a 9 million wildebeest herd.
No.
Why not?
Why not?
I'll show you a video sometime and I'll show you why not.
Show it to us now. Is it like the movie 300?
Haven't you ever seen The Lion King?
Yeah.
Stampede?
Like, are there ever just like really mentally incapacitated, lions or mentally incapacitated things from the species that will just go with? Okay.
Usually when you see animals that do this, and not always, but when you see the large groups of animals, usually they do have a, they're usually a little bit dumber. You don't usually see smarter animals that group up in herds these large. I mean, you do have like lions predators are pretty intelligent in general because they have to outsmart the prey. Lions do group together. They're clumped. They have their pride. But generally they're not huge. Like usually they're maybe like 10, maybe 15 organisms, 10 to 15 different lions. They're not 9 million of them in one spot.
That'd be terrifying.
9 million lions, that would.
So wildebeest aren't going extinct anytime soon.
No. Wildebeest are one of probably the few animals in Africa that are not currently threatened or endangered. Yes. So yay, wildebeest.
It's a wild.
What about badgers?
Badgers would probably have more of a uniform distribution. They would be clumped for the little bit of time when they have offspring, but they're pretty aggressive towards each other. They like their space. Probably a uniform distribution or even slightly random, but not really aggregated.
I'm driving home tonight, and then it was bad burrowing into like slight hill on the side of the road, and I was like, this is so cool. But I was like driving past, and then it was like kicking dirt out, and I was like,
Badgers are cool when you see them. They're pretty hard to see. They don't occur. You don't see them very often, but when you do, they're cool.
That was the only time I've seen them.
What organisms can you think of that have a clumped or aggregated distribution? Fish. Well, yeah, fish I have up there. Schooling fish. Deer can be aggregated. It depends on the time of year.
Like right now.
Right now they're in the breeding season. They're definitely a clump right now.
A couple years ago, I was chatting with my dad, and there was like a giant group of deer, like I think we were going to Wanamina or something on the highway. And there was like a deer that looked just like that.
Yep. Sometimes you get the clumped. What else?
Cows.
Cows. Yeah. Very human driven, but lots of cows with herding mentality. Bison.
Sheep.
Bison actually do something really cool. We're going to talk about it on Wednesday. So I'm not going to spoil it because we're going to talk about bison on Wednesday.
I like bison.
Population of people.
Huh?
The population of deer. It was like a billion people in that one country.
So yeah, you can look at the human population. We might not think of it, but we humans tend to go through a aggregated distribution because we're pretty social organisms. We're clumped in cities and villages and towns. There's not a lot of people out in rural areas. We are pretty clumped or aggregated. Wasps. Wasps. Wasps are definitely clumped or aggregated. We're going to talk more about wasps in a couple weeks. We've got uniform. This means that their organisms are evenly distributed, and this is mostly driven by the drive for personal space. They usually tend to be more aggressive animals. They are social, but only to a degree.
Oh, eagles. What are
Like
they eating?
bald eagles. Has anyone ever watched the live bald eagle cams the DNR puts out every couple of years?
I
Like
watched a
every year?
documentary on it.
Yeah. So bald eagles mate for life. They're a pair. They let each other within they have their zone where they live, and they're happy with that. But if any other bald eagles come into their space, they're not thrilled.
They're all like, heck no, fam, you ain't getting on my nuts.
Yeah, you tell them, CJ.
Biology with
Has anyone ever been to the Bald Eagle Center in Wabasha, Minnesota? A little bit far for you guys, but so Wabasha has one of the only areas in the country that has a specific building that houses bald eagles. Like they take in bald eagles that have been they've been poisoned because of lead, they've fallen and broken a wing, hit by a car, stuff like that. And they nurse them back to health, and you can go there, and they actually have like 7 or 8 different bald eagles that you can view. And like they bring them out, you can see how big they are. They feed them in front of you. It's a cool experience. It doesn't take very long. So if you ever find yourself down by like Winona or heading down that way, stop in Wabasha. They've got a lot of good experts there. It's like you can walk through the whole thing in an hour. But we're looking at limiting space, limiting food. We're limiting our mates, or there's only a few mates available. Pretty territorial. Bald eagles don't like other bald eagles coming into their area. Bald eagles don't really like other animals in general coming into their area. What other? I've got my zone. I've got my bubble.
humans.
Humans can. Like if you think about an apartment building, if you just focus on people living in an apartment building, that's pretty uniform. All of them have their own specific space that they live in. What other animals might practice uniform distribution?
Those termites.
Termites, like we started the thing with, the slideshow.
Gophers.
Gophers. Gopher holes, anyway.
Coyotes.
Coyotes.
Wait, now they go in packs.
Coyotes are tricky because coyotes traditionally are a uniform distribution. Coyotes in a natural environment do not get in packs. And that's primarily driven by wolf populations. So in areas where you have wolf population or a large wolf population, or you have a group of wolves living together, coyotes will live by themselves as an individual. But when you remove the wolves, you remove that top predator, the coyotes start to get a little bit brave, and they start to group together and actually take on characteristics of wolves.
What? That's creepy.
God.
God.
Yeah, wolves stand probably about that high.
You're so really
Like, stop it.
About that high.
No.
Yeah, they're like a dog.
Well, the only place you see wolves most of the time, they're coming around a lot more now, would be if you go to Yellowstone or if you go to a zoo. And most of the wolves that they have at zoos, I mean, they haven't grown up in a free range, so they're smaller than they normally are.
Are wolves so
Like that, stand like that tall
That's like
at the shoulder.
At the
I always
shoulder.
thought wolves were like German shepherds.
Bigger than German shepherds.
Yeah.
German shepherds got nothing on wolves.
Wow.
You ain't got nothing on me, boy. You ain't got nothing on me.
And then our last one, random distribution.
That's so random.
So there's no rhyme or reason. There's plenty of resources available. They're not worried about space. They're not worrying about a close relative living near them, especially with corals. Most of the time you see this in plants and sponges. Not all plants do this though. Like I was saying in the video, there are plants that are pretty hostile towards other plants. Literally make the ground more acidic and they attack other plants. Corals do actually attack each other. Corals are animals. They actually attack each other. I'll show you some videos of that later in the year, where you will see active corals fighting each other. Some things that kind of lead to this is it kind of is all about wind or current dispersion, meaning when the corals or the plants release their pollen or their sperm into the water and they release their eggs and their seeds, the wind is responsible or the current is responsible for moving them. So wherever they fall, they just grow there. But usually there's plenty of resources available. There's not a limited amount of water. There's not a limited amount of food or shelter or space. They're not too worried about those things. Random distribution, like they was saying in the video, it's the least common of the three. Least common of the three. Animals can come in and out of it. It's not like all animals belong to one type of distribution. It can depend on the type of year, via its mating season, or if there's a large amount of salmon or other migratory animal moving into an area that predator-prey relationship can kind of lead to. Any random distribution organisms that live around here that you can think of? Humans can kind of be random. We have our moments. Usually there's a pattern to it, because usually we live in cities or apartments or villages.
Oh
God, no.
Lions are aggregated. Dandelions are random.
Buckthorn.
Buckthorn is definitely random.
Oh, that sucks. That stuff sucks. Saplings.
Yeah, most trees around here go through a random distribution. Any animals you could argue might be random?
Deer.
Deer could be. Foxes. Foxes very well could be during part of the year. Black bears during the time, sometimes of the year might be random.
I want a parakeet.
Parakeet.
Yeah.
Cat that doesn't
Parakeet.
Yes, but that is not this week's cat.
A parakeet.
So for you guys that did come in because of a conflict, make sure you turn in your Isle Royale Wolf document. Most of you are almost done on it anyway, you just got to turn it in. And then we do have a quiz, an open note quiz on Friday about population ecology. So the slideshow from last week and then this week.
Are you recording this?
Yes.
Okay, because
Yeah, this is
population curve thing. I'm like, probably gonna need it.
Yeah, this is recorded.
Okay.
Yes, we did. There was a parakeet.
So, because of time, well, we can do this really quick. Everyone in your notebook or on a sheet of paper, draw me an example of a clumped or aggregated distribution. Draw me an example of a uniform distribution, and draw me a quick example of a random distribution. Lauren, put your phone away. CJ, put your phone away.
I'm sorry.
Come on, CJ, you know that.
I'm talking to a guy about mine.
Yeah.
Just make sure we can aggregate. Make sure you can see clear, different groups. But other than that, you're good.
Think about the niche of the rabbit. It lives in fields, so it's a member of the field community or assemblage. Here it has many roles. First, it eats plants, so the rabbit is a herbivore. Some of the plants the rabbit eats might also be eaten by meadow mice. That makes the rabbit a competitor to meadow mice. The rabbit could also have parasites, such as tapeworms. That makes it what is called a host. The rabbit may be hunted by gray foxes. That makes it a source of food for foxes. The fox that eats the rabbit may get the rabbit's parasites. That makes the rabbit what is called a parasite vector. And as a parent, the rabbit may raise over a dozen young a year. So the rabbit reproduces rapidly and is a member of the field community, where it is a plant eater, a competitor to meadow mice, food for foxes, and a parasite carrier. All this helps determine the rabbit's place in the natural world and forms its niche. No two species have niches that are exactly alike. Each species has its own special physical characteristics and way of life that set it apart from all other animals.
So a niche. This is a specialized job that each animal, each organism has. Each species has its own special niche. No other organism can fill that niche. That niche is its job. It's where it belongs, whether it's a competition between different organisms, whether it's a predatory relationship, whether it's a prey relationship, what it eats, what it eats, what eats it, what lives inside of it. All of these different traits that are found in environments, only one animal can fill that role at a time. So if we focus in on like squirrels, squirrels have a specific niche that no other animal can fill. Only a squirrel can have that role. If we do have niches that are closely related to each other or are similar, we get competition there. So that is selected against through natural selection, because that's competition is bad. If we can limit competition, we're good. We have a better chance of surviving. If we look at birds here, this whole idea of a niche can lead to different evolution of colors in birds, what type of beak that they have. So if we look at a woodpecker has a very specific pointed beak. In fact, if we were actually to dissect a woodpecker has evolved the ability where its tongue actually wraps all the way around its skull and acts as cushion for when it's hitting the tree. That's a niche that no other bird can fill other than that woodpecker. That's a specialized role. A toucan has an elongated beak. It's very colorful. That is specifically for eating different fruits. If I were to put a woodpecker in an environment with lots of fruit, that woodpecker would not survive very long because its beak isn't designed that way. If we look at another unique, the bill of a flamingo. Does anyone know what flamingos eat?
Something.
Filter feeders.
They eat algae. Flamingos are filter feeders, and their beak has been specifically designed to fill the niche of a filter feeder in its ecosystem. If we continue to look at birds again, just by the spot a nest occurs on a pine tree, that's a niche location. That's a niche for that different bird. Just by where the nest is located. So we look at this pine tree and we find a nest towards the top of the tree, but on the outside limbs, that would belong to the black burrian warbler in this case. If we were to move inside towards the top center of the tree, we'd have a whole different species of bird living in that area alone. They each have their own niche. They each have their own role in the ecosystem. And when you have niches that are similar to each other, you get competition, and competition decreases the fitness of an individual, which causes them to survive less. So each bird, when they make a nest, there's a specific location they're making that nest. And there's an exact reason they're making that nest. All right, so we're going to skip the video for now, and we're just going to focus in on these three curves here. So these are population curves that all populations, whether you're talking about humans, whether you're talking about wolves, bobcats, saber-toothed tiger, whatever, all these populations go through these different sequences. So you have the first one, which is it's a true pyramid. You can see it has a large base, a very small top. That's telling you you're going through rapid growth when you see that. The way this works is on the left-hand side, you're going to see the age of individuals. So in this case, we're focusing on a human population, specifically of the Republic of Congo. You have individuals that are 0 to 4. We have a large number of individuals that are 0 to 4 years old. As we go up, that population decreases a little bit. The number of individuals in that age group decreases. So we go up, we go up. What is happening to our population here?
Smaller.
It's getting smaller and smaller. Why?
People die off.
People die off. In a lot of populations, especially in human populations where you don't have good health care, good shelter, lots of natural disasters, this is a type of curve you tend to see, where you have lots of individuals born, but not many of them actually make it to adulthood. By the time they reach 20, 25, we've almost cut our population in half from the ones that were born at the beginning. As we get to a slower growth rate, meaning we have almost equal numbers of birth to death, we stabilize. So we're going to see almost a uniform trend until we get to the very top. So in this situation with slow growth rate, we are growing a little bit, but population isn't increasing a lot. We're staying pretty much the same. Most individuals that are born live to see old age. So in this case, almost till 55, 60, we don't actually start to see our population decrease until after that. And then with negative growth, usually we'll see something like this, where our base is really small, and then we have a wider spot as we get older. So there's very few young individuals in this population, but right in the middle, there are a lot of individuals that are in the 50s or 60s, right around where they're receiving Social Security, stuff like that. So, I mean, these are the three main trends we can see in a population. Most of the time we're talking about populations in an ecosystem, this is the one we're talking about. Most individuals don't survive to adulthood. We're going to skip that slide because I'm more, we're going to stop here. We're going to stop here. Because of time, because we got a minute left. Yeah. Well, this will be the last slide. So population density, the total number of individuals in an area, declines with increasing organism size. So a smaller organism, organisms that physically have smaller bodies. You're going to see more individuals in an area. So if we focus on something like a mouse, there's going to be a lot more mice in an ecosystem than there would be a coyote. The bigger the body size, the less space that those organisms, or the more space those organisms need. So if we had 1,000 mice in an ecosystem, you wouldn't see 1,000 coyotes. You couldn't. There just wouldn't be enough space for all of that. There wouldn't be enough resources for that. When we do start to see this population increase, we always have a carrying capacity. So that's usually like the max. That's the max that an ecosystem can hold, right? Like without any issues. There's plenty of resources available. They're good. We'll talk a little bit about this on Wednesday, and then we're going to jump into bison. I've got a thing on bison that we're going to do on Wednesday.